stop what you're doing. Put down your phone for just a second. Look around the room you're in and ask yourself this question. Why did I click on this exact video at this exact moment? Not approximately why, specifically why. Because out of millions of pieces of content flooding your feed right now, something made you stop here. Something made you lean in. Something whispered that this matters in a way you can't quite articulate yet. That something wasn't random. It wasn't the algorithm. It wasn't luck or coincidence or your restless scrolling habit. What brought you here is the same force that's been orchestrating increasingly strange events in your life over the past few weeks. The same intelligence that's been leaving breadcrumbs you keep almost noticing, but not quite acknowledging. The same presence that wakes you up at 3:17 a.m. with your heart racing and your mind unusually clear, downloading information you have no framework to process. You're here because your breakthrough already started. Not starting, not about to start. Started. Past tense. Completed action. The quantum shift that people spend decades meditating and manifesting and hoping for has already initiated in your system. And here's the part that's going to sound impossible until you feel it in your bones. You can't stop it. You can't reverse it. You can't go back to who you were 3 weeks ago, even if you wanted to. The membrane has been crossed. The Rubicon has been traversed. The only direction available is forward into something your current identity structure has no reference points for. I know what you're thinking. Another spiritual message promising transformation. Another teacher claiming to have secret knowledge. Another video that's going to tell me I'm special and then sell me a course. Your skepticism is intelligent, it's protective, it's appropriate. Keep it. Because what I'm about to share isn't belief or philosophy or positive thinking. This is observable physics playing out in your direct experience right now. And the most dangerous thing you could do is believe me. Don't believe anything. Just pay attention to what's actually happening in your life and see if the pattern matches what I'm describing. 3 weeks ago, give or take a few days, something happened. You might not remember the exact moment. It probably wasn't dramatic. Maybe you were driving and suddenly felt like you were watching yourself drive rather than driving. Maybe you were in a conversation and heard yourself speaking as if the words were coming from somewhere else. Maybe you woke up one morning and the color of the light looked different, not brighter or dimmer, just fundamentally altered in a way you couldn't explain to anyone. Whatever the moment was, it created a fracture, a clean break between the version of you that existed before and the version that's been operating since, and that fracture has been widening every day. You've been attributing the strangeness to stress, to lack of sleep, to too much screen time, to the general chaos of being alive right now. But deep underneath those explanations, you know something else is happening. Something that doesn't fit the normal categories of human experience. Here's what occurred in that moment of fracture. Your consciousness, which had been operating within a very specific bandwidth for your entire life, suddenly expanded beyond its previous boundaries. Not through meditation or plant medicine or spiritual practice, through what quantum biologists call spontaneous coherence. Your neural network spontaneously reorganized into a higher order pattern. And once that reorganization occurs, it propagates forward. It cannot unpropagate. The wave has already collapsed into a new configuration, and there's no uncollapsing it. The technical term for what you're experiencing is quantum decoherence reversal, but let me explain what that means in terms of your actual lived experience, because the physics don't matter if you can't recognize the symptoms in your daily life. When your consciousness operates at its normal bandwidth, you experience reality through a specific set of filters. Time feels linear. Cause and effect seem clear. Your identity feels consistent. You know what you like, what you believe, who you are. These filters create a stable, predictable experience. Boring sometimes, but safe, manageable, within the boundaries of conventional possibility. But when decoherence reversal initiates, those filters start malfunctioning. Time stops feeling linear. You'll be sitting in a meeting and suddenly realize you have no idea if 5 minutes passed or 50. You'll look at your calendar and be genuinely shocked that it's already Thursday, or confused why Monday seems to be taking a week to complete. This isn't poor time management or attention deficit. This is your perception literally shifting out of sequential processing into what physicists call probability cloud awareness. You're starting to experience multiple potential timelines simultaneously, instead of writing one clear narrative from past to future. Cause and effect become scrambled. You'll think about someone you haven't spoken to in years, and they'll text you 20 minutes later. You'll have a random urge to take a different route to work, and later discover there was an accident on your usual path. You'll dream about a conversation, and then have that exact conversation the next day with all the same peculiar phrases. Your rational mind will try to explain these as coincidences, but they're happening too frequently now. The correlation has become undeniable. Your thoughts and your reality are starting to bleed together in ways that violate everything you were taught about how the world works. Your sense of identity has been the most disturbing shift. You look in the mirror and recognize your face, but feel like you're looking at a stranger. Not in a dissociative way, in an objective way. Like you're finally seeing the person clearly, instead of through the fog of who you thought you were supposed to be. People who've known you for years keep asking if you're okay, if something happened, if you've changed. And you haven't done anything differently. You haven't made dramatic life changes or adopted new philosophies. But something essential has shifted in how you occupy space, and other people can feel it even if they can't name it. The breakthrough that's moving through you isn't happening because you're special or chosen or more evolved than other people. That's ego trying to make sense of something that has nothing to do with personal achievement. What's happening is that consciousness itself is evolving on this planet right now. The frequency of available information has intensified to a point where certain nervous systems are spontaneously upgrading to process the increased input. You didn't do anything to deserve this. You can't do anything to stop it. Your biology is responding to an environmental shift the same way previous generations responded when oxygen levels changed or temperatures dropped. Evolution happens whether individuals consent to it or not. But here's where it gets complex. Just because the breakthrough started doesn't mean it completes. This is the part that most spiritual teachers don't tell you because it complicates their narrative. Quantum decoherence reversal initiates spontaneously, but it stabilizes conditionally. Meaning the shift that began in you will either integrate fully into a permanent new operating system, or it will abort. It will collapse back down into your previous patterns. And the window where that decision gets made is right now, not metaphorically, literally right now. In this phase you're in, which typically lasts between 3 and 6 weeks from initiation, the breakdown begins with sleep. Over the past few weeks, your sleep architecture has been completely disrupted, hasn't it? You're either sleeping 12 hours and waking up exhausted, or sleeping 4 hours and waking up with unusual vitality. Your dreams have become vivid, symbolic, and sometimes terrifying. You dream you're in places you've never been, but that feel more familiar than your actual life. You dream you're speaking languages you don't know. You dream you're watching yourself from outside your body, observing scenes from an aerial perspective like a documentary camera. These aren't random dreams. This is your consciousness attempting to process the new bandwidth it's accessing. During normal sleep, your brain consolidates daily experience and does routine maintenance. During breakthrough integration, your consciousness is literally rebuilding its entire perceptual framework. Every night while you sleep, neural pathways that have been running the same patterns for decades are being pruned and rewired. New connections are forming between regions that previously didn't communicate. Your default mode network, the part of your brain that generates your sense of continuous self, is being reconfigured. This is why you wake up feeling like you've been somewhere else. Because you have. Not in the sense of astral projection or leaving your body, but in the sense that consciousness isn't local to your brain. Your awareness has been accessing information fields that exist outside the boundary of your skull. And when you return to waking consciousness, there's a lag. A few seconds where you have to remember who you are, where you are, what year it is. That lag is your awareness relocating itself back into the specific coordinates of your personal identity. The physical symptoms have been escalating too. Unexplained pressure in your chest that isn't anxiety, but isn't quite comfortable either. A sensation like electricity running through your arms and legs, especially at night. Temperature fluctuations where you're suddenly burning hot or freezing cold, regardless of the actual room temperature. Ringing in your ears that comes and goes without pattern. Digestive irregularity. Skin sensitivity where clothes feel too rough or touch feels too intense. Headaches that don't respond to medication. Your doctor would find nothing wrong. These symptoms aren't medical problems. They're recalibration signals. Your nervous system is upgrading its capacity to process energy and information, and that upgrade creates temporary instability in your physical form. The pressure in your chest is your heart field expanding. The electricity in your limbs is your cellular structure adjusting to hold higher frequency input. The temperature shifts are your endocrine system recalibrating. The ear ringing is your auditory processing starting to pick up frequencies it previously filtered out. These sensations are uncomfortable, but they're not dangerous. They're evidence that the breakthrough is working through you at the biological level. Then, there's the social breakdown. This is often the most painful part. People you felt close to suddenly feel distant. Conversations that used to be easy now feel forced and hollow. You find yourself having less and less patience for small talk, for pretending, for maintaining relationships that are based on who you used to be rather than who you're becoming. And the worst part is, you can't explain this to anyone. Because how do you tell your best friend that you love them, but being around them feels like wearing clothes that don't fit anymore? How do you tell your family that you're not depressed or going through a crisis? You're just experiencing reality completely differently than you did a month ago? Some relationships will survive this transition. The ones built on genuine resonance rather than shared history or convenience, but many won't. And that loss is part of the breakdown that has to happen before the breakthrough can complete. You're not pushing people away. You're shedding versions of yourself that needed those relationships to remain intact. The relationships that were holding you in your old identity structure cannot survive your shift into a new one. This sounds harsh, but it's mechanical. Like a snake shedding skin. The old layer has to separate completely for the new skin underneath to emerge. What you're experiencing right now is what mystics call the dark night, what psychologists call ego death, what physicists call phase transition. Different language, same phenomenon. The structure that organized your reality is dissolving before the new structure has fully formed. You're in the gap, the void, the space between who you were and who you're becoming. And this space is terrifying because humans are meaning-making machines. We need coherent narratives. We need to understand what's happening and why. But breakthrough doesn't happen within the framework of your current understanding. It shatters that framework first. The meaning comes later, after you've crossed through the chaos. Here's what nobody tells you about spiritual awakening or quantum shifts or consciousness evolution or whatever term you want to use. It doesn't feel enlightening while it's happening. It feels like everything you trusted is betraying you. Your body doesn't feel safe. Your mind doesn't feel reliable. Your emotions swing wildly between euphoria and despair. Your relationships fracture. Your certainties dissolve. The things that used to matter stop mattering. The things you never thought about suddenly seem urgently important. You're losing your mind in the most literal sense. The mind you had, the one that knew how to navigate your old reality, is being decommissioned. And this is where most people abort the process. This is where the breakthrough that started spontaneously gets collapsed back down into the familiar. Because the human nervous system will choose familiar suffering over unknown possibility every time, unless it's given a compelling reason not to. Your survival mechanisms don't care about growth or evolution or becoming your highest self. They care about keeping you alive. And alive means predictable. Alive means known. Alive means within the boundaries of what you've proven you can survive. So your ego, which is just a collection of survival strategies that have been running since childhood, starts generating intense resistance. It creates doubt, makes you question whether anything unusual is actually happening, or if you're just having a prolonged stress response. It generates shame, makes you feel like you should be handling this better, like everyone else has their life together and you're falling apart. It creates urgency around practical matters, reminds you about bills and responsibilities and reasonable adult behavior. All of this is designed to pull you back into your previous operating system before the shift completes. But here's what your ego doesn't understand. The breakthrough isn't optional anymore. The process already started. The only choice now is whether it completes consciously with your participation or unconsciously as your system fights itself. If you resist what's trying to happen, if you try to force yourself back into your old patterns and relationships and identity structure, you won't stop the breakthrough. You'll just make it exponentially more painful. Because your consciousness is already operating at the new frequency, and your ego is trying to run old software on new hardware. The incompatibility creates massive internal friction. This is why some people experience what looks like total life collapse during breakthrough. They lose their job, or their relationship implodes, or they have a health crisis or financial disaster. Not because the universe is punishing them, but because their conscious mind is desperately trying to maintain control while their consciousness is trying to break through. The external chaos is just a reflection of the internal war. When you fight evolution, evolution wins, but it wins through destruction of whatever structure is in the way. There's another path. Instead of resisting the breakdown, you can work with it. Instead of trying to hold your old reality together, you can consciously participate in its dissolution. This doesn't mean quit your job or end your relationships or make dramatic external changes. It means stop pretending you're fine. Stop forcing yourself to care about things that no longer resonate. Stop maintaining a version of yourself that no longer exists just because other people need you to be consistent. The practical application of this is simpler than it sounds, but harder than it seems. When you notice you're in a conversation that feels hollow, stop participating. Not rudely, but authentically. When you notice you're doing something purely out of obligation that has no genuine resonance, stop. When you notice you're pretending to be certain about something you're actually confused about, tell the truth. Every time you choose authentic confusion over false certainty, every time you choose real discomfort over fake ease, every time you choose unknown truth over familiar lies, you're supporting the breakthrough instead of fighting it. Your breakthrough will complete, but what you become on the other side depends on how consciously you move through this transition. Some people complete the shift and emerge more integrated, more authentic, more aligned with their actual nature. Others complete the shift and emerge traumatized, destabilized, unable to function effectively in consensus reality. The difference isn't in the intensity of the breakdown. The difference is in whether you resist or allow, fight or flow, contract or expand in response to what's trying to happen. Right now, pay attention to your body. Notice if there's tension anywhere. Your jaw, your shoulders, your stomach, your chest. That tension is resistance. That's your system trying to maintain control in the face of uncontrollable change. Breathe into wherever the tension is, not to make it go away, but to bring conscious awareness to it. To acknowledge that yes, this is terrifying. Yes, you don't know what's happening. Yes, everything feels uncertain, and you're going to be okay anyway. Not because I'm promising you some enlightened future, but because you've already survived every moment of your life up until now, including this one. The people who are meant to understand what you're going through will appear, not through searching or explaining or trying to make others get it. They'll simply show up. You'll be in a coffee shop and someone will sit next to you, and within 3 sentences you'll know they're experiencing something similar. You'll be scrolling social media and a post will stop you cold because the words describe exactly what you've been unable to articulate. You'll meet someone's eyes across a room and recognize something familiar even though you've never met. These aren't coincidences. These are members of your new resonance field becoming visible to you as you stabilize in your new frequency. The practical world will reorganize around your shift. Not magically, but mechanically. When your internal frequency changes, your external circumstances must reconfigure to match. This is physics, not wishful thinking. You're a broadcasting antenna. Whatever frequency you're emanating, reality responds by delivering experiences that match. When you were operating at your old frequency, you attracted circumstances that reflected that bandwidth. As you stabilize in your new frequency, different circumstances will begin appearing, different opportunities, different people, different possibilities that weren't visible before because you weren't vibrating at the frequency where they exist. But this only works if you don't try to control it. The moment you start trying to manifest specific outcomes or force particular changes, you collapse back into ego management. The breakthrough wants to deliver something beyond what your current mind can imagine. If you tell it what you want based on your old identity's preferences, you'll block what's actually trying to come through. The instruction is simpler and harder than manifestation techniques. Allow the breakdown, trust the dissolution, stay present with not knowing, and let reality reorganize itself without your interference. The timeline for breakthrough completion varies. For some people it's 6 weeks from initiation to integration. For others it takes 6 months. The duration isn't important. What matters is recognizing you're in it so you stop fighting it. The worst suffering comes from thinking you should be past this by now, that something's wrong with you for not having clarity yet, that you need to figure it out and get yourself together. You don't need to figure anything out. You need to let yourself fall apart. Consciously, with as much awareness and as little resistance as possible. Write down what you're experiencing. Not for social media, not for anyone else, but for yourself. Because your rational mind is going to try to erase these memories once you stabilize. It's going to retroactively create a smoother narrative where you had more control and understanding than you actually did. But if you document the chaos, the confusion, the fear, the strangeness as it's happening, you'll have evidence later that you survived something impossible. And that evidence becomes medicine for others going through their own breakthrough. The next few weeks are critical. This is where the integration either stabilizes or aborts. Stay close to what feels real, even when it makes no sense. Distance yourself from what feels hollow, even when it's comfortable. Trust your body's signals over your mind's explanations. Choose uncertainty over false certainty. Allow relationships to shift or end without making it mean something's wrong with you. Let your interests change without judging yourself as flaky or inconsistent. Stop trying to be the person you were and start being curious about who's emerging. You're going to be okay. Not the way you thought okay would look. Not the way your old self defined success or stability or happiness. But okay in a way that's more real, more aligned, more actually you than anything you've experienced before. The breakdown is brutal. The confusion is disorienting. The not knowing is terrifying. And on the other side of all of that is a version of yourself that your current mind cannot conceive of. A version operating from clarity instead of confusion, from authenticity instead of performance, from flow instead of force. Your breakthrough already started. You found this message because your system needed to know that what's happening is real, is natural, is survivable. Thousands of people are going through this exact process right now. Most of them think they're alone, think they're broken, think something's wrong with them, but you're all part of the same wave, the same evolutionary impulse moving through human consciousness. Not special, but participating in something that's reorganizing how humans experience reality. Stop fighting. Stop forcing. Stop pretending. Let it happen. The life you're being delivered into is waiting on the other side of your willingness to let your old life die. And it's already dying. You felt it the moment you started reading. The recognition that there's no going back, only forward into territory you cannot map from here. Trust that. Trust the breakdown. Trust the dissolution. Trust that whatever's trying to emerge through you knows what it's doing, even when you don't. Your breakthrough is unstoppable now. The only question is whether you'll move with it or be dragged by it. Choose movement. Choose allowance. Choose consciousness participation in your own evolution. Everything changes from here. Not because you make it change, but because you finally stop preventing the change that's been trying to happen all along. Welcome to the other side of who you were. Welcome to the beginning of who you actually are. But let me tell you about something nobody mentions in these conversations about transformation. Something that's probably already happening, but you haven't had words for yet. Your emotional range is expanding in ways that feel destabilizing, almost dangerous. You'll be sitting at your desk and suddenly feel overcome by grief that has no clear source. Not sadness about something specific, just grief. Pure, ancient, bottomless grief that feels like it's coming through you rather than from you. And then, just as suddenly, it passes. Or you'll be walking down the street and experience a wave of joy so intense it makes you want to laugh out loud for no reason anyone else would understand. This isn't mood instability. This is your emotional body coming back online after years of suppression. Most people navigate life with access to maybe 20% of their actual emotional capacity. The rest gets filtered out, dampened down, managed away because full-spectrum emotion is incompatible with functioning in a world that requires you to be productive, pleasant, and predictable. But breakthrough doesn't care about your productivity. It's restoring your full range. And at first, that restoration feels chaotic because you have no practice holding space for emotions at this intensity. The specific emotion that's probably troubling you most is one that contemporary psychology has no name for. It's not quite sadness, not quite longing, not quite nostalgia. It's the feeling of mourning a version of your life that never actually happened, but that you'd been unconsciously planning for. The future you were building toward, the identity you were becoming, the relationships you thought would stabilize, the understanding you thought you'd eventually achieve. All of that has been revealed as fantasy, not because it was impossible, but because it was based on who you were before the fracture. And that person doesn't exist anymore. So you're grieving someone who isn't dead. You're grieving yourself. The version of you that would have lived that life, made those choices, become that person. And this grief doesn't resolve through acceptance or closure or moving on. It resolves through recognition that who you're becoming has access to possibilities that version of you could never have touched. But you can't see those possibilities yet. You're in the space between losing what was familiar and receiving what's waiting. And that space requires you to grieve without knowing what comes next. There's something else happening at the perceptual level that's probably making you question your sanity. You're starting to see through the performance, not just your own performance, but everyone's. You watch people in conversations, and you can see the exact moment they abandon what they actually wanted to say and replace it with what they think they should say. You observe someone's face, and you can perceive the gap between the expression they're wearing and what they're genuinely feeling underneath. You hear people speak, and you register not just their words, but the belief systems generating those words, the wounds driving those beliefs, the fear protecting those wounds. This isn't judgment. It's not that you suddenly think you're better than everyone else. It's that the filter that used to make social interaction smooth has been removed. You're seeing the raw mechanics of human interaction, and those mechanics are exhausting to watch because you can't unsee them once they become visible. Every conversation becomes multiple layers of simultaneous communication. What's being said, what's being meant, what's being avoided, what's being protected, what's being sought, and you're receiving all of it at once. The hardest part is that you can't explain this to people without sounding arrogant or delusional. How do you tell someone that you can feel the falseness in their enthusiasm without making it sound like an accusation? How do you navigate a work meeting when you can sense that everyone is performing competence while actually feeling confused and afraid? How do you maintain relationships when you're aware of the unspoken contracts and unconscious agreements that hold them together? You can't. At least not in the way you used to. Some people will sense that you're seeing more than they're comfortable with and will distance themselves automatically. Not because you did anything wrong, but because unconscious patterns can't survive in the presence of someone who perceives them clearly. Your mere presence becomes destabilizing to people who need their illusions to remain intact, and you can't pretend you don't see what you see just to make others comfortable. That would abort the breakthrough faster than anything else. Here's what's happening in your nervous system that explains why everything feels so intense right now. Your vagus nerve, which regulates your entire autonomic response, is recalibrating. For your entire life up until the fracture, your nervous system had learned to respond to the world through a specific set of protective patterns. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn. These patterns helped you survive your specific childhood, your particular family system, your unique combination of experiences. They became automatic, invisible, just the way you are. But those patterns were designed for a world that no longer exists. They're trying to protect a version of you that's already gone. And as your consciousness upgrades, your nervous system has to upgrade too. It's learning to process information and respond to stimuli without immediately activating the old protective sequences. This recalibration is what's creating that jittery, overstimulated feeling you've been experiencing. Your system is literally learning a new language. And while it's learning, everything feels slightly dangerous because your old threat detection system isn't working reliably anymore. What helps, counterintuitively, is not trying to calm yourself down. The impulse to immediately soothe any discomfort, to manage your nervous system back into familiar ranges, that impulse is part of the old programming. Instead, practice being with intensity without needing to change it. When your heart rate increases for no apparent reason, don't immediately try breathing exercises. Just notice. When you feel that electric aliveness in your limbs, don't try to ground it out. Let it move. Your system is building new capacity, and capacity builds through challenge, not comfort. There's a particular experience you've probably had recently that felt significant, but you dismissed because it seemed too strange to take seriously. You were alone, maybe in your car or lying in bed, and for just a few seconds, you experienced yourself from the outside. Not like an out-of-body experience, more like suddenly becoming aware of yourself as a character in a story you're simultaneously watching and living. In that moment, you could see your entire life as a coherent pattern, could understand choices you'd made that never made sense before, could feel compassion for versions of yourself you'd been judging for years. That wasn't dissociation, that was perspective shift. Your consciousness briefly stepped outside the first-person narrative it's been locked in and observed from a higher vantage point. This is one of the primary capacities that breakthrough is installing. The ability to hold multiple perspectives simultaneously, to be both the person living the experience and the awareness observing that person living the experience. To feel your emotions fully, while also recognizing them as weather patterns moving through the vastness of what you actually are. This capacity is what allows you to navigate the rest of the transition without getting destroyed by it. Because from the first-person perspective, the breakdown feels catastrophic. Everything you thought was solid is revealed as temporary. Everything you thought was true is shown to be partial. Everything you thought was you is exposed as costume. But from the observer perspective, the breakdown is just information. Data about what was never real to begin with. And that recognition doesn't create more pain. It creates space around the pain that was already present. The breakthrough completes when these two perspectives integrate. When you can be fully immersed in your human experience while simultaneously resting in the awareness that watches the experience. Not split, not dissociated, integrated. You feel everything, respond to everything, engage with everything. But you're no longer trapped in the story your mind tells about what everything means. You're living the story while knowing it's a story, and that knowing changes everything about how the story unfolds. You're closer than you think. The fact that you're still reading, still present, still willing to sit with uncertainty means the integration is already happening. The breakthrough that started weeks ago is reaching its completion phase. What comes next won't look like you imagine. It will be simpler, more ordinary, less dramatic. Just you, moving through your life, making choices from a place that doesn't need to understand everything before acting. Trusting yourself in a way you never could before. Not because you became more confident, but because you stopped believing in the separate self that needed confidence to begin with. Your life is about to become unrecognizable, even though nothing external may change. The person who wakes up tomorrow will look like you, sound like you, have your memories and your relationships and your responsibilities, but they won't be you. They'll be who you become when you stop defending against what you actually are, and that person gets to live in a completely different reality than the one you've been occupying. Same world, different experience. That's what breakthrough delivers. Welcome home.